The night did not begin with violence. That detail mattered to the people who survived it, because afterward they would all say the same thing, that if had been a sound, even a distant one, they might have understood what was coming. Thunder warns, wind warns, even war announces itself. But this night arrived quietly. Somewhere near the Mississippi River, in a frontier town that barely existed on maps, a man named John Bradbury, a local postmaster, was awake. He had been restless for days, not afraid, just unsettled. The river had been behaving strangely. The air felt wrong. Horses refused to settle. Dogs barked at nothing. Bradbury would later write that the land felt awake. At around 2 a.m., the feeling sharpened, not into sound, into motion. The floor beneath him slid sideways, slow enough to register, fast enough to terrify. His first thought was not an earthquake. Earthquakes, as people understood them then, cracked ground. They shook, they ended. This did something else. It moved the world underneath him, as if the earth were a rug being pulled without warning. Outside, trees leaned, though the air was still. Fence posts tilted in the same direction, like compass needles suddenly agreeing on a new knot. Before Bradbury could reach the door, the motion intensified, and the idea that this might stop, that it might simply be over, disappeared. Because the land began to roll. People later struggled with this word. Roll implied water, not soil. Roll implied waves, not ground. But that was the only language they had for what they were seeing. Visible ripples moving through fields, lifting and dropping the earth as if the continent itself had forgotten how to stay rigid. Then the Mississippi River hesitated. This detail appears again and again in eyewitness account, written by different people miles apart, who had no way of coordinating a story. They all described the same moment. The river slowed unnaturally, as if something beneath it had clenched. And then it ran backward. Both snapped their ropes and slid upstream. Water piled against itself. Along the banks, sections of land rose so abruptly that temporary waterfalls appeared where no elevation had existed moments earlier. Men standing on the shore did not shout or run. They simply stared, because the river had just contradicted gravity, and nothing prepares a mind for that. Bradbury forced himself outside. The town was dissolving. Cracks opened in the ground, not with noise, but with an unsettling softness, like cloth tearing under pressure. From these fissures came water, sand, and thick mud that smelled of sulfur and rot. The earth wasn't breaking apart, it was liquefying, losing the properties that made it safe to stand on. People who tried to run learned this immediately. Feet sank, knees followed. One man pulled another free only to lose his own balance and disappear to his waist. Houses did not collapse in the way buildings do during storms. They sank, slowly enough for witness to understand what was happening, quickly enough to make it irreversible. Bradbury saw a family trapped near the riverbank, the ground beneath them turning into slurry. He did not think in terms of heroism. That word comes later when the danger has passed. He thought in terms of weight and time. He crawled, not walked, because standing had become a gamble, and reached them by gripping exposed roots and fence rails that had not yet been swallowed. The ground surged again. This was a moment people later described as the land losing its temper. The shaking intensified, then eased, then returned harder, as if the earth itself were testing different ways to tear itself apart. Each surge erased landmarks, roads vanished, familiar trees lay at angles no wind could explain. And then the darkness arrived. Not the normal darkness of night, but a choking, particulate blindness. Entire forests were collapsing at once. Their roots ripped free as the soil turned into liquid. Dust, dirt, bank, and smoke from shattered herds filled the air so thickly that lanterns became useless. Candles died instantly. People dropped to their hands and knees because standing was no longer safe. Crawling was not a choice, it was a survival tactic. Somewhere in the dark, someone screamed that this was Judgment Day. No one argued. The shaking paused, just long enough for hope to form, and then it surged again, more violent than before. This pattern repeated through the night, then through the days, then through the weeks that followed. This was not one earthquake. It was thousands, a cascade of aftershocks that refused to let the land forget what it had started. On 7 February 1812, the strongest wave tore through the region. In what is now western Tennessee, the land finally surrendered. It dropped suddenly, violently, creating a basin into which nearby rivers rushed. Forests drowned where they stood. Trees did not fall. They remained upright as water rose around them, their roots still gripping the soil that no longer existed. By morning, a lake had appeared. Reelfoot Lake did not form slowly. It was not shaped by centuries of erosion. It arrived in hours, a scar filled with water. Its surface pierced by the dead trunks of trees that had once stood on dry ground. Bradbury survived. So did others. Not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they adapted faster than fear could freeze them. They learned to move low, to listen for changes in sound, to read the ground the way sailors read waves. They also learned something else. The earth was not finished. Shock waves raced outward through the continent's bedrock, carried efficiently by old, cold stone that transmitted energy farther than anyone understood at that time. In distant cities, people woke confused as walls trembled. In Boston, church bells rang without hands. In Philadelphia, chimneys cracked. Half a continent felt something shift beneath it and had no language for what that meant. Eventually, the shaking slowed. Not ended, slowed. People rebuilt because that is what humans do when the alternative is madness. Cabins returned, roads were redrawn, memories softened, stories hardened into legend. But beneath the Midwest, nothing healed. Because the cause was never at the surface. The earthquakes came from an ancient scar. A failed rift from when North America nearly tore itself apart hundreds of millions of years ago. The rift did not succeed, it did not disappear, it went dormant. And dormancy is not the same as safety. That scar still lies beneath the land, still active, still capable of lifting rivers, liquefying soil, and creating lakes overnight. In 1812, few people lived about it. Today, millions do. And the ground remembers exactly how it moved. History does not always repeat itself loudly. Sometimes it waits, perfectly still, until we forget it ever moved.